October 3rd, 1944. Near the German border. The forest is completely dark. No moon. No wind. No sound. The kind of silence that makes every breath feel too loud. Gefreiter Lucas Weber lies prone behind a shallow embankment, staring into the blackness ahead. He can't see the enemy. No one can. But they're out there, somewhere beyond the trees. A soldier beside him whispers, "Do you hear anything?" Weber listens. Nothing. And that's worse. Because in the dark, silence isn't safety. It's uncertainty. A sudden burst of gunfire erupts from further down the line. Short. Controlled. Then stops. Everyone freezes. Waiting. Listening. Seconds pass. Then, a distant whistle. Weber's body tightens instantly. Impact. An explosion tears through the area where the shots came from. Then another. Closer. Precise. Too precise. They got them. Someone whispers. Weber doesn't move. Doesn't speak. Because something doesn't make sense. That was too fast. Artillery doesn't respond that quickly. Not normally. Not without adjustment. Not without time. But this was immediate. Another soldier shifts slightly. Maybe they were already spotted. Weber shakes his head slowly. No. Because they weren't moving. They weren't exposed. They just fired. And that's what changed everything. The forest falls silent again. Heavier now. More tense. Because now, everyone is thinking the same thing. Did the shooting reveal them? Minutes pass. No one fires. No one moves. The entire line holds its breath. Because now, the darkness feels different. Not like cover. Like a trap. A soldier further down the line whispers, "Should we fire back if they shoot again?" No one answers. Because the answer isn't obvious anymore. Before, it would have been simple. Return fire. Hold position. Engage. Now, it feels like a choice with consequences. Weber grips his rifle tighter. His finger rests near the trigger. But he doesn't move it. Because now, firing isn't just an action. It's a signal. And signals get answered. A distant noise breaks the silence. Movement. Soft. Somewhere ahead. Weber hears it. So do others. The tension builds. Every instinct says, fire. But something holds him back. Because now, another instinct is louder. Wait. Don't reveal yourself. Don't become a target. The movement gets closer. Branches shift. Leaves crunch softly. Someone whispers urgently. They're right there. Weber can feel it. The enemy is close. Very close. This is the moment. The moment where training says one thing, and experience says another. A soldier down the line fires. Just one shot. The sound echoes through the forest. Loud. Too loud. Weber closes his eyes for a split second. Because he already knows what's coming. The whistle. Again. Faster this time. Closer. Impact. The explosion lands exactly where the shot came from. No delay. No correction. Direct. Then more shells follow. Walking through the position. Searching. Destroying. Weber presses himself into the ground. Heart pounding. Because now, it's undeniable. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't chance. It was cause and effect. You fire. They find you. You reveal yourself. They respond. Immediately. The bombardment ends as quickly as it began. Silence returns. But it's not the same silence. Now it carries something else. Understanding. Weber lifts his head slowly. Around him, no one speaks. No one questions, because everyone felt it. The connection. The pattern. And once a pattern is seen, it cannot be unseen. Weber looks out into the darkness again. But now, he doesn't see it as cover. He sees it as something else. A space where the enemy is waiting for a mistake. And that mistake is a single shot. He lowers his rifle slightly. Because now, the rules have changed. Not officially. Not ordered. But understood. Firing at night doesn't protect you. It exposes you. And if that's true, then the next time the enemy moves closer, what do? The forest hasn't moved. October 3rd, 1944. But the feeling inside it has changed. No one speaks now. No whispers. No shifting positions. Even breathing feels controlled. Because sound matters. Everything matters. Gefreiter Lucas Weber lies exactly where he was before, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. But he's not waiting to fire anymore. He's waiting not to. A soldier inches closer beside him, barely audible. Did you see where that last shell hit? Weber nods slightly. Right on him. Not near. Not around. On him. That detail doesn't leave the mind. Because artillery isn't supposed to work like that. It's supposed to search. Adjust. Miss. This doesn't miss. A faint sound echoes somewhere to the left. Movement again. Subtle. Almost imagined. Weber hears it. So do others. But no one reacts. No one fires. Because now, they're thinking differently. The enemy isn't just ahead. The enemy is waiting for them to reveal themselves. And that changes the fight completely. Minutes pass. The movement continues. Closer now. Branches shifting. Footsteps on soft earth. A soldier's hand tightens around his rifle. He leans slightly forward. Ready. But he hesitates. Because now there's a second thought. If I fire, what happens next? That question didn't exist before. Now it dominates everything. Another soldier whispers. They're getting closer. Weber nods. He knows. He can feel it. The tension is building. This is the moment where a fight usually begins. But something is different. No one wants to start it. Because starting it might end it. Suddenly, a burst of fire erupts from the right flank. Automatic. Short. Reflex. The soldier couldn't hold it. The sound tears through the silence. And instantly, everything stops. Not just the shooting. The forest itself. As if even the night is waiting. Then, the whistle. Faster than before. Impact. The explosion lands exactly on the source. No hesitation. No delay. Then another. And another. Walking across the exact position. Precise. Controlled. Weber presses into the dirt, heart racing. Because now, it's undeniable. It's not just a pattern. It's a system. The bombardment ends quickly. But the message remains. Clear. Immediate. Final. You fire. You die. Silence returns. But now, it's heavier. More complete. Because something has changed in everyone. Not fear. Understanding. A soldier beside Weber whispers, "We can't shoot." Weber doesn't respond. Because he knows. And everyone else does too. Another movement ahead. Closer than before. This time, very close. A shape moves between the trees. Barely visible. Enemy. Within range. Within reach. This is the moment. The moment where training says, engage. But experience says, wait. Weber's finger rests on the trigger, but it doesn't move. Because now, pulling that trigger means more than just firing a weapon. It means calling something down on yourself. Something fast. Something precise. Something unavoidable. The shape moves again. Closer. Still no one fires. Because now, silence is survival. The enemy continues forward. Not attacked. Not challenged. Because the cost of shooting is too high. Weber watches as the figure disappears into the darkness, untouched. And that is the moment everything changes. Because now, the battlefield is no longer controlled by firepower. It's controlled by fear of response. And that fear stops action, stops engagement, stops everything. Weber exhales slowly. Because now, the realization is complete. This isn't about winning a firefight. It's about avoiding detection, avoiding response, avoiding death. And if the only way to survive is not to shoot, then what happens to the fight? October 3rd, 1944. No one fires anymore. Not because the enemy is gone, but because the cost is understood. Gefreiter Lucas Weber remains in position, eyes fixed on the darkness, but his mind is somewhere else now. Thinking. Not about the enemy ahead, but about what's happening behind the scenes. Because this doesn't feel random. It feels organized. A soldier beside him whispers, "How are they doing it so fast?" Weber doesn't answer immediately, because he's asking the same question. Artillery takes time. It needs coordinates, adjustment, communication. But this is instant. Too instant. Another soldier leans closer. Maybe they already know where we are. Weber shakes his head slightly. No, they don't know until we fire. That's the key. The trigger. The moment of exposure. He looks at his rifle. At the barrel. At the source of the sound. Because sound travels. And in the night, it travels far. Far enough to be detected, tracked, measured. Back at a distant Allied position, far beyond Weber's view, a small team sits around equipment. Headphones on. Listening. Not for movement. For sound. Gunfire. Every shot creates a signature. A direction, a distance, and once that information is captured, it's sent, fast, to artillery units already prepared, already waiting. Coordinates arrive. Guns adjust instantly. Fire. No delay. No hesitation. Because the system is built for speed, for response, for accuracy. And that's what Weber is beginning to understand. Back in the forest, he looks around again. At the men beside him. At the silence holding them in place. And now, it makes sense. This isn't luck. This isn't coincidence. This is a system. A chain of detection, followed by immediate destruction. And once you are part of that chain, there is no escape. A soldier whispers. So every time we shoot, Weber finishes the sentence quietly. They hear us. And then, they hit us. Simple. Brutal. Unavoidable. The realization spreads through the group. Not through orders. Through logic. Through experience. Because now, they've seen it enough times. Felt it enough times. To know it's real. A soldier looks at his weapon. Then slowly lowers it. Because now, that weapon feels different. Not like protection. Like exposure. Weber notices the change. The shift in behavior. No one is eager to fire anymore. No one is ready to engage. Because engagement has a new cost. And that cost is immediate. Another sound ahead, closer than before. Enemy movement. Clear now. Within range. This should be the moment. The moment where they open fire. Where they take control. Where they fight. But no one moves. No one shoots. Because now, they understand the system. And understanding it changes everything. Weber watches the movement carefully, calculating, not distance, consequence. If he fires, they will know. If they know, they will respond. And if they respond, this position is gone. That's the equation now. Clear. Simple. Deadly. The enemy continues moving, unchallenged, because the cost of stopping them is too high. Weber exhales slowly, because now the war has changed. Not on maps, not in reports, but in behavior. Because soldiers who hesitate to fire are not fighting the same war anymore. They are surviving it. And survival is not victory. It's delay. The silence holds, unbroken, heavy. Because now, it's not just fear keeping them quiet. It's knowledge. And knowledge is harder to ignore. Weber closes his eyes briefly. Because now, the truth is clear. This isn't a battlefield where strength decides outcomes. It's a battlefield where detection does. And once detection leads directly to destruction, every shot becomes a risk. Every action becomes a decision. And sometimes, the best decision is to do nothing. But if doing nothing keeps you alive, then what happens to the war? October 4th, 1944. Forward Command Shelter, near the front. The reports don't match the doctrine. They never do. Oberleutnant Heinrich Adler stands over a rough wooden table, a dim lantern casting long shadows across the map. Positions marked. Units noted. But something is missing. Engagement. Why are they not returning fire? Adler asks, voice controlled but tense. A radio operator hesitates, then answers quietly. They say firing brings artillery. Immediately. Adler looks up. That's not possible. Because if that were true, everything changes. Another report arrives. Second platoon held fire despite enemy proximity. Adler's jaw tightens. Holding fire? He repeats. In any other situation, that would be failure. But now, it's becoming normal. Back on the line, Weber remains in position, watching as faint shapes move through the darkness ahead. Closer now. Close enough to hear breathing. Close enough to engage. But no one fires. Because everyone knows what comes next. The pattern is too clear. The cost too high. A soldier whispers, "We should stop them." Weber doesn't respond, because he knows what that means. One shot, one signal, then the whistle, the impact, the end of this position. Adler steps outside the shelter, listening to the silence of the front. No gunfire, no engagement, just stillness. That's wrong. Completely wrong. Because silence in war usually means something is coming. But here, it means something has stopped. He looks toward the front lines, trying to understand. Because soldiers are trained to fight, to react, to engage. And yet, they're not. A staff officer approaches. "They're adapting," he says quietly. Adler turns. Adapting to what? The officer pauses, then answers. To survive. That word lands heavier than expected. Because survival is not the objective. Victory is. But survival has become the priority. Back in the forest, Weber shifts slightly, careful not to make noise. The enemy is still there, moving. advancing, unopposed. Because now, opposition comes with a cost they can't afford. A soldier beside him tightens his grip on his rifle, struggling, because every instinct says, fight, but every experience says, don't. That conflict is new, and it's breaking something. Adler returns inside, staring again at the map. Positions still marked, lines still drawn. But those lines assume something, that soldiers will fire, that they will resist, that they will hold. And if they don't, the map becomes meaningless. We can't hold positions like this, Adler says quietly. No one argues. Because holding requires engagement, and engagement triggers response. Immediate, precise, unavoidable. Another report comes through. Enemy patrol passed within meters, no shots fired. Adler closes his eyes briefly. Because now it's undeniable. This isn't isolated. It's spreading, unit by unit, position by position. Silence is becoming standard. Weber watches as the enemy movement fades into the distance. Gone, untouched. And that moment settles in deeply, because now something fundamental has changed. They didn't lose the fight. They chose not to fight, because fighting means being found, and being found means being destroyed. A soldier whispers, "What are we doing?" Weber answers quietly, "Staying alive." That's the truth now. Not strategy, not orders. Instinct, survival. Adler grips the edge of the table, staring down at the map again. Because now, the realization is forming. Not slowly, clearly. If soldiers stop firing, they stop fighting. If they stop fighting, they stop holding. And if they stop holding, the front collapses. Not from force, but from silence. Weber looks into the darkness one last time. The enemy is gone. The position still stands, but it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like something else, something unfinished, because the cost of survival is control, and once control is lost, everything else follows. October 6th, 1944. Forward line near Aachen. The first light begins to break. Not bright. Just enough to separate shapes from shadows. Enough to see what remains. Gefreiter Lucas Weber sits in a shallow trench, staring out at the quiet battlefield ahead. No gunfire. No movement. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that feels unnatural. Because something is missing. Resistance. He adjusts his grip on his rifle. But he doesn't raise it. Not anymore. A soldier beside him speaks softly. "We made it through the night." Weber nods. But there's no relief in it. Because surviving the night doesn't mean anything has changed. It just means they didn't fire. And not firing is what kept them alive. That realization sits heavy. Because it shouldn't work like that. War isn't supposed to reward silence. It's supposed to reward action. Aggression. Control. But here, silence is what decides everything. Back at the command position, Oberleutnant Adler studies the latest reports. Minimal engagement. No return fire. Positions held, but inactive. He sets the paper down slowly. Because now, the truth is clear. They're not holding the line. They're avoiding it. Avoiding the fight. Avoiding detection. Avoiding the response. And that changes the meaning of everything. Back in the trench, Weber looks out again. The battlefield is visible now. Empty. But that emptiness isn't victory. It's absence. Because the enemy moved through the night. Unchallenged. Unstopped. Because stopping them would have meant firing. And firing would have meant destruction. A soldier whispers, "They were right in front of us." Weber nods slowly. "I know. And we didn't shoot." Weber doesn't respond, because that's the part that matters. Not that the enemy came, but that they were allowed to. Because the cost of resistance was too high. Adler steps outside, looking toward the quiet front. He can see the positions. Still intact. Still occupied. But something feels wrong, because holding ground without fighting isn't holding at all. It's waiting. Waiting for something inevitable. A staff officer approaches. "What are your orders?" he asks. Adler pauses. Because orders assume control, assume options. But what options are left? Fire and be destroyed, or stay silent and be bypassed. Neither leads to victory, only delay. Back in the trench, Weber lowers his rifle completely, resting it across his knees. Not ready, just there. Because now, it's no longer a tool of action. It's a reminder of what they can't do. A distant sound echoes faintly. Engines. Movement. The enemy advancing further. Deeper. And no one stops them. No shots. No resistance. Because the rule has been learned. Not through command. Through survival. Do not fire. Weber closes his eyes briefly. Because now, the realization is complete. Not forming. Not spreading. Settled. They didn't lose because they were overpowered. They lost because they were controlled. Controlled by a system that punished every action. That turned every shot into a signal. That made silence the only safe choice. And once silence becomes survival, the fight is already over. Weber opens his eyes again, looking out at the quiet battlefield. No smoke. No explosions. Just stillness. And in that stillness, the truth. That the war didn't need to destroy them completely. It only needed to stop them from fighting. Because once soldiers stop shooting, they stop resisting. And once resistance stops, the outcome is already decided. Weber exhales slowly. Because now, he understands everything. They didn't lose the night. They surrendered it. Without firing a single shot.